Hi there, and welcome to the HR Podcast. This is Linda Misegadis
and Cyndi Manuel, and we'll be your co-hosts. After spending years working in and with HR, we thought, why not start a podcast to support the important HR community? We believe the way things have always been done isn't necessarily what's going to work in the future. So we're diving into topics that support HR and working women as they navigate the future of work. We're talking about professional growth and also how we can support each other as human beings.
We can't wait to bring you insights from HR experts, thought leaders, and inspiring women who are making a real difference in their organization and communities. They'll share their journeys and tips on balancing work and life in a better way. We're excited to learn alongside you and hope you'll pick up some great takeaways from tips and tricks to worksheets that you can actually use in your daily life. So grab your favorite beverage
or lace up your walking shoes and join us for the HR Her Resources podcast.
Well, we are so excited to be here for our next edition of the Her podcast, HR podcast. Cyndi, it's always great to see you.
You too. How are you doing, Linda?
I'm good. It was a long week, though.
Was it?
Yeah. I don't know why, but it just felt like a long week. I kept waiting for Friday, and nobody was confirming it was Friday. So,
can I get a Friday?
Yes. Can somebody tell me it's the end of the week? But it was nice rolling into the holiday weekend, so that was good. But how about you? How are you doing?
Things are crazy right now, but it's because my husband and I are going on vacation.
That's so
in
fun.
A week.
That's
so
great.
It's like the runway leading up to that.
Yeah.
So it's been a little nutty.
Yeah, that does. It's always hard when you're going on vacation. But I'm assuming you're going to go on vacation and you're going to unplug, though, right? You're not taking anything with you?
A nice drink on the beach.
Good for you.
Little relaxation, toes in the sand, get in the water. We're good to go.
Good. Yeah, I'm really glad to hear that. Yeah. No, that's awesome. Good. Well, we're excited because we actually have our first guest in studio today. So thank you so much. Dr. Jennifer Cooper is joining us here today. And we're going to be talking about women's health and well-being. And we thought, Cyndi and I have all of our opinions about that, but we're like, let's bring an expert on women's health and well-being.
Talk to somebody who knows.
Yeah, who knows this stuff. So we're very excited to have you in the studio with us today.
Oh, and I'm excited to be here. This is a new adventure for me too.
Oh, good. No, we're very
happy.
Yeah. Well, Cyndi, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about Dr. Cooper?
Yeah. Well, before we get into your bio, Dr. Cooper, I want to just talk about some statistics that I looked up because to me, and a big part of our podcast really is, it's not just women at work, but it's also, how do we take care of ourselves? How do we show up for ourselves? And I know back when I had my daughter, which was almost 21 years ago now, it was, how are you taking care of your child? How are you taking care of your family? Right. And then how are you fitting your career in around that? Nowadays, it's more, how are you taking care of yourself so you can take care of other people? Yeah. And so I really love that. But a couple of statistics that I found were that overall wellness. So according to a 2023 Gallup poll, 60%, which is huge, of working women feel that balancing work and personal life is their biggest challenge.
Wow.
Which, first of all, we know there's no such thing as work-life balance, right?
Right.
And we've actually talked about that before. Yeah. It's like, how do you integrate the two? There's no such
balance.
Thing as balance, but 60% is pretty big.
That is pretty big. You wonder if they'd have done that Gallup poll 10 years ago, or
it would have been different.
Yeah, what it would have looked like. You think that number would have been significantly higher.
Absolutely.
But it really hasn't. I mean, if we would have those numbers and looking at it, it probably hasn't come down that much then.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, and I think people are probably thinking about this, the context behind it a bit more nowadays than
That's
they were
true.
back then.
That's true.
Too,
Yeah, because you didn't, especially
before the
for women.
Pandemic.
Yeah, that is very true. Yeah.
Sleep. And this is a big one for me because I have both of these, insomnia and restless leg syndrome. So fewer than 2/3 of women get 7 hours of sleep each night and suffer more than men from insomnia and restless leg syndrome.
Well, I believe it. Yeah. I'm not an expert in it, but knowing some of the changes that our brains go through during pregnancy and in newborn care, and then later in life with perimenopausal transition, these are life stages for us that disrupt our sleep patterns that biological males don't experience. So,
Right.
Lucky for them. So then mental health. According to the Mayo Clinic, women are nearly twice as likely as men to be diagnosed with depression, which I've heard that more than once. And then heart health. A study done by the Centers for Disease Control found that despite heart disease being the leading cause of death among women in the U.S., which makes me very sad, nervous, all the things, right? Only about 56% of us recognize that heart disease is the number one killer.
And we assume breast cancer, right? That's immediately. We think that more women die from breast cancer. Yeah, you don't think about women's hearts. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's so true. That's crazy.
And we hear that every February, which is Heart Month.
That's true.
And we in the OBGYN world keep trying to make the primary care and cardiology folks recognize that pregnancy is like a giant cardiac stress test. That's why it's important to take a pregnancy history in the world of primary care and pick up those clues. Were they preeclamptic? Did they have some other spectrum of hypertensive disorder in pregnancy? Did they have gestational diabetes? Because all of those things have a lifelong impact on cardiovascular health. And so we know it's out there, and it keeps just not getting the recognition that OBGYNs want it to have.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
See, that's brilliant.
That's exactly. Great opportunity to highlight that.
Exactly.
So,
and this to me, again, because my daughter's going to be 21 here in November, 1 in 17 women aged 20 years and older have coronary artery disease.
Wow. That is crazy. I would never have guessed that.
I would have thought it would have been like 40 and older. 50 and older, but 20 and older.
That we start laying down those plaques.
Yeah.
And I don't actually know the statistics if it's the same in males or not, because
interesting.
We know that men still die at a younger age, right? Cardiovascular disease, leading killer of both males and females, but the males are dying sooner. Some of us think that that's kind of a testosterone-driven process, but I don't.
Interesting.
So
that would make
be
sense.
Interesting to know the comparison number in young males and females. Yeah.
Well, good point. Yeah, because you're right. Because we focus on older, but the younger, and where is it starting? And fascinating, interesting, great stats, Cyndi.
Yeah,
great way to start things off.
I always kind of find things interesting like that. But
absolutely.
And thank you for all the additions to all of this stuff too.
The mental health one, I've always wondered, because we've always been told that. But I know from observing my own husband and son how difficult it is to get them to present for medical care. I often wonder, is it truly a difference in the existence of a mental health disorder, or is it just
that we talk about
we
it
show
more?
Up and get the diagnosis, and then a little bit of a difference in presentation, right? I've read some smaller studies saying, depression in women often presents more as sadness, but in men more as anger. And so are we assigning the correct diagnosis with the anger and irritability, or are we expecting to see sadness?
That's a really good point. Yeah. Well, and I think too, we always hear women are crazy. And so
which is not true.
Which is not true. And I wonder if some of that is like this pre-conception, right?
Yes.
That it's women. And I wonder sometimes even like, are all of those diagnoses even correct? Because I do think men are just not allowed to show the mental health side of it as much. Now they've got that Movember where there's like the focus on men's mental health. And I supported one of the people that I used to work with. She does a fundraiser every year for it. And it's, and I love doing that because we need to raise awareness that men equally, or if not more often, are suffering from mental health illnesses. And to your point, they're not presenting differently, or they're presenting differently. Well, that's why we wanted to have Dr. Cooper here, right?
Yeah,
so all of those stats and having you in the studio to really kind of talk about these things. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about Dr. Cooper?
I'm going to share what I know.
Okay.
But then I want you to share more.
Okay.
So I did my research and found that you have been in general obstetrics. I know I was going to not say that correctly initially. And gynecology since 2005, which is great.
Yes.
Your undergraduate degree was from Rice University, and then you attended Baylor College of Medicine for medical school and your residency, and then returned back to Colorado, which is your native state. Mine too.
Mine too.
Yay!
Bunch of natives in the house today. Yes.
To raise your family and practice medicine. And so I also see here that you're board certified by the American Board of Obstetrics and Gynecology. One of the things that I was very excited about, because this just sort of encompasses a big part of why we're doing this podcast, but why we're so happy to have you here, is you had a statement that says, I believe in the importance of compassion and using education and collaboration, I love that, to empower women to actively participate in their own health and well-being, which is huge.
Yeah.
So what did I miss there? Fill in the blanks for us. How'd you get into
why OBGYN? Why medicine in general, though? I mean, because that's not easy. I mean, that's a hard route to choose to take. So.
I can't remember a time when I wasn't planning to be a doctor. And my parents have said, even from when I was little, that that's what I wanted to do. And I remember, do you remember the Scholastic Book Fairs?
Oh, yes.
Kids?
I loved them.
had a book it was a biography about Elizabeth Blackwell, one of the first female doctors in this country. And I thought she was amazing. So I remember that book kind of inspiring me and thinking, I want to be like that. So I never really strayed from that. I did go into medical school thinking that I would be a pediatrician. I mean, I had volunteered at the Texas Children's Hospital. I loved working with the kids. And I still love the kids. But when I did my pediatric rotation, I realized that was absolutely not for me. Pediatrics wasn't what I thought it would be. And then fortunately, when I did my obstetrics and gynecology rotation, I loved it. I loved that it was a wide spectrum of ages, right? We see, I don't do pediatric gynecology, which is the little kids that might have congenital anomalies or things like that. But basically from around age 12 upwards is the age that I see. I have patients in their 90s. I mean, it's every decade in between. I got to work with my hands as well as with my brain. And that was kind of a big revelation for me, that I enjoyed it and I was pretty good at it. Which that wasn't my own assessment, right? But people working with me said that, including Dr. Myrna Bowden, if she's out there listening, was one of the people that helped move me along this path.
That's great.
By saying, honestly, you were good at that. And that was a remarkable moment for me.
What a mentor
doing an exam
to say something like that. Yeah.
And so it was great. And then every other rotation I did, because there are core rotations that all medical students are required to do, OBGYN just kept being my favorite. And I didn't think that I would like it. So I had actually scheduled it early in my rotations.
Yeah, just to get
it out of the way.
Yeah.
And that ended up working out well, because then I knew how much I liked it. And after I did it, and then every other rotation, well, I didn't like it quite as much. So that kept reaffirming that it was the right choice.
That's great.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? So not only are we excited you're here as a medical professional, but also just to hear your journey.
Yeah.
And how you were thinking one thing, and how I think so many of us kind of happen into what we were meant to do, you know, and
you hope at least eventually, right?
Yeah.
Because I think most, it takes a little while sometimes to figure that out. And I mean, you think about when we were growing up, we were either going to be a teacher, right? Or maybe you are going to be a nurse, but rarely were you going to do the things that most women do today. It's like you just had this path that you were kind of heading down. And so it's wonderful to see just how much that's changed.
Yes.
And also, I didn't even realize that with medicine, when you do your residency, that you do all those different pieces of it, the rotations, to kind of like try these different components, which is probably brilliant, because like you said, you were going to go to a
Smart.
pediatrician. And what if you would have done that and hated every second of it?
Right.
That's a lot of time and effort to put into something that you're then not going to enjoy. So,
Yeah. So when you see a doctor who went to medical school in America, know that they did have to rotate through
all of it.
amazing.
Yeah.
internal medicine, general surgery, OBGYN,
Very smart.
psychiatry, neurology, pediatrics, things like that.
Well, and seeing the body, then you also, it's a more holistic view as well.
Absolutely.
Right.
Because we're not just one-dimensional.
Right.
There's so much to everything.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. Well, I would imagine, too, then you have had to have seen a lot of changes as it relates to women's health, because you think about I remember when my mom talked about, and you probably remember this too, Cyndi, and you as well, Jenny, is thinking about the, like, you weren't allowed to get out of bed. They were in the hospital for like 7 to 10 days. They weren't, they couldn't hold the baby or do anything. It was just kind of silly when you think about it now. Essentially, they want you in and out as quickly as they possibly can, assuming you don't have complications. But just how much it has evolved as you've probably learned and seen and changed. But
it has changed.
I bet that's been
fascinating.
Once
we found the receipt for my grandmother giving birth to my dad.
Okay.
And he was not her first child, so was an experienced mom by that point, but just a routine, uncomplicated birth and stay in the hospital 1 week.
Yeah. I mean, even my kids are 15 years apart, and I remember with my son, it was much different than with my daughter. It was just like, okay, you had the kiddo, like get up, get out of bed, let's walk around. I think I ended up staying maybe one extra day just because I was just exhausted, and I think I had some anemia at that point. So, but other than that, and then we were sent home, which is you can heal so much better at home.
Although sometimes I do think maybe we're too fast for
I do wonder a little bit about that, because we are awfully quick to push you out of the hospital.
Right. And there are some people for whom that's absolutely the right decision. They're doing fine. Honestly, they're the ones that could go home a few hours later. They're only hanging out while we check out the baby for the first 24 hours. But there are others where they could use a few extra days of support. And this is one of the areas where I think American healthcare is broken, is that it ends up being payer driven instead of caretaker decision making driven. So I don't have a solution for that. It's just,
I love
but
that.
There is a spectrum of what is good for people.
And
that kind of brings me back to your quote, first of all, but also, and Linda, you and I have talked about this a bit. I think that there should be more, like we always talk about, advocate for yourself when you're working with a healthcare provider. But I actually think it would be a better approach to collaborate with your doctor. So you and I are a team. I've just had a baby, and so you and I have these conversations, and then you as the medical professional can say, hey, Cyndi, I really think you need a couple more days in the hospital. Here's why. And, we kind of make that decision together.
I mean, I would love for it to be that simple, but
probably the insurance company, though, right?
Are we going to win the battle to get it paid for? No. And do I want to saddle someone with the financial burden of paying a hospital bill? No. So
that's probably the good and bad of insurance, right? You think back in the way olden days when doctors just practice medicine without the constraints of insurance. And I mean, obviously, insurance is a great thing to have. However, it comes with all of this added, which has got to be incredibly frustrating for doctors as well, because you're the ones who are trained to make all these decisions. And yet it feels like it's the insurance companies who are maybe making those decisions instead. So, that is I think that would be the hard part.
So, what are some things that we can do, though, to collaborate with you or collaborate with our healthcare providers, obviously knowing that the insurance is going to play?
Well, a visit with your doctor is so much more productive if you come in knowing how to give a medical history. If you come in knowing how to accurately say the diagnoses that you've had, the names and the doses of the medications that you've been prescribed and that you're actually taking. And sometimes those are different. So do be upfront and honest with your doctor. You know, if you're with someone where you're feeling judged, maybe that's not the right fit for you, because you want someone with whom you can be open and honest and say, okay, I was prescribed this. I'll tell you the truth. I only remember to take it 3 days a week. I mean, that's helpful knowledge.
And you need to know that.
Know which surgeries you've had.
Okay.
Know which parts were removed during those surgeries.
Right. Yes.
Really important.
Yeah. And it's surprising to me how many people don't know. So like I said, the visit will be so much more productive if you know those things. So write them down or take advantage of the technology that we have. I mean, we have portal access. So write those things down. Know your actual allergies, things like that. And then we've accomplished so much more right at the beginning if you come in knowing that. So then it makes it easier to interpret what symptoms you have and know where we're starting from.
How do you recommend? So one of the things like I know I'm terrible about is I will drag it out forever before I finally go in and see the doctor. And then when I go in, I probably have a little bit of like oversharing with everything. And so then it's like, where do you start with that? So what do you recommend as far as like when you go in, how to maybe prioritize to say, these are some of the key things that I'm experiencing, instead of, maybe having a little bit of like that dump to say, here's everything that is going on right now. Now figure out why it's happening. Because my guess is everything that's going on is not all related. There's probably one, each of those things probably has their own thing. Well, how do you recommend when you finally do make that decision to go in and have those conversations? What's the best way to present that information?
Well, for me, I think if a patient comes in and has that big dump of information, that's okay. But no, if she will accept that we're going to need more than just that visit, right? Because I might only have 15 minutes and I can't get very far. So a willingness to accept that it might take multiple visits. And that's where we run into some frustration with insurance, right? Because I know people get upset with the copays. I can't fix that right now. But truly, it takes time to explore all of those. So know that the first visit might just be to lay out the framework of what is going to need to be addressed at future visits. And I know that my primary care colleagues have to do this a lot, right? They have to say, okay, well, first we're going to focus on the cardiovascular things because that's the leading killer. That's the one that's going to kill you. That's the one that we need to get fixed first. And then that irritating rash on your foot is going to maybe be third or fourth on the priority list. So I think go in knowing that it's going to take multiple visits. It's going to take time. And you should work with your doctor to establish what the priority list is. But it's very okay for the doctor to know up front what the list is going to be. And then set a schedule
to get that information than
I personally find it helpful to know, okay, what all do we have to tackle? But now let's sort it into categories. And the next visit will focus on this category. And then the one after that, we can tackle that. Or maybe this second item, well, I need to know some information from the evaluation of the first item before I can give an intelligent answer to the second item. That in my world, that happens a lot for hormone replacement things or perimenopausal transition symptoms. If you told me there's some abnormal bleeding, I need to know about that first before I can talk to you about what is a safe option for your hot flashes. I need to make sure there's not a precancer causing your bleeding. So even though the hot flashes might be bothering you more than the frequent spotting, I need to fix the spotting issue first or understand the spotting issue first.
So also being upfront and open as well. And so the more information you share honestly about what's going on and maybe not dismissing, because I think as women, we have a tendency to dismiss our own symptoms as just being, well, I'm just a woman. I guess that's just what happens. And so we tend to be dismissive maybe of some really important things we should be paying attention to.
Well, and to that point, I was on estrogen as a supplement and I ended up getting a DVT. And my doctor was like, I'm so sorry, but you know, having a blood clot in your leg is a little more critical than having hot flashes. So, so we figured out another course of action.
No, that's very true. That's crazy. Yeah.
Whew.
That's a lot.
Are you looking for innovative and creative content options? Needing audio or video production or consulting? Or do you just have a great idea that you want to bring to life? LJM Productions specializes in making the big picture attainable, from commercials and social media content to just audio-visual cleanup and editing. We are here to make your next big project a reality. For more information or to receive a quote, email ljmproductionsco@gmail.com.
Well, what do you want to talk about next, Cyndi? Because we have all kinds of questions we want to ask you.
Bring it on.
Keep you here, Jenny.
Bring it on.
We could. Yes, exactly. We could do multiple episodes right here. Yes, absolutely.
We might need to bring you back, by the way.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. So, and we all know, nutrition, sleep, and all of that plays a part in stress and stress management and health and all of that.
Yeah.
But what would be maybe some recommendations from you, or what's some insight from you, Jenny?
Yeah. Honestly, exercise is probably the foundation. And am I good at that myself? No, not necessarily. Right. But am I working on getting better? Yes. But really, if you find studies out there that use exercise as an intervention over and over again, it shows same or better outcomes than a lot of other medical or nutritional interventions that we do. And my personal opinion is that for people around my age, so late 40s, early 50s, that we didn't get quite the emphasis in maybe elementary and middle school on the importance of muscle building exercises for females.
It's more cardio.
And I mean, cardio is important, but as we get older, the muscle building exercise is so important for helping to reduce bone loss and muscle loss, but helping us to keep our balance as we get older so we don't fall and break something and lose our ability to live independently. But also, there's a lot of marketing out there about changing your metabolism, and most of that is medically incorrect. But the one thing that actually does help counteract the aging process of slowing of the basal metabolic rate is increasing your muscle mass. So doing exercises that help put on muscle mass, because muscle has a higher base metabolic rate even at rest. And so that's the one thing that actually works and helps and makes us feel better physically and mentally. So I think that's the foundation. And then eating right is important. And I'm not a nutrition expert, but one of my professional heroes is Dr. Jen Gunter, who's a gynecologist that puts a lot of good quality information out in the social media world. And I like her approach, which is start with fiber. If you're going to pick one macronutrient to look at, just if you are feeling overwhelmed by overhauling your complete diet, just start with counting how many grams of fiber per day that you get. You aim for 25 to 35 grams of fiber every day. And really, once you get that fixed, probably a lot of other things will fall into place, because to get enough fiber, you needed to eat more vegetables and you needed to eat more legumes and the whole grains rather than the processed grains. So tackle that first, and then you can move on to lowering your carbohydrate intake and getting your vitamins through your diet, which is eating all the colors of the rainbow in your vegetables and your fruits, and getting your healthy proteins, which is going to be more fish-based or plant-based protein than red meat, even though I love a good steak. And healthy fatty acids, which is your omega-3 fatty acids, right? Fish, nuts, olive oil, avocado. So a Mediterranean-style diet is keeps
funny how much
showing
it comes
over
back
and
to
over.
that. Yeah, because we hear that all the time. Our doctor, she's very big on talking about that, from diabetes to autoimmune to all of it. She's like, I'm going to always lean back into the Mediterranean diet because it just is fundamentally provides all the foundation that you need in order to have a healthier lifestyle. So,
and the evidence keeps supporting that that's the healthy diet to follow. Sometimes my patients ask me for a resource. I kind of like the Harvard-sponsored MIND diet.
Okay.
And that was a diet looking to reduce dementia. I'm not sure that they really achieved that, but it's a really good information source on a Mediterranean-style diet. And it's a blend of Mediterranean and something called the DASH diet, which was dietary, I can't remember, alternatives
like
are
healthy
to
one,
stop
right?
hypertension. Right. It's to help lower blood pressure. So it's a good resource of what constitutes a Mediterranean style diet, or what are the healthy foods that we should be choosing.
We'll put some of these. We'll put some of these resources in our
for
show
sure.
notes.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
No, that'll be really good. Well, and I'm curious too. It's kind of funny because we're a victim of our own circumstances, right? Because that is how we used to eat. I mean, I think about growing up, my mom portion controlled because we never had processed food. It was a treat if you went to the fast food restaurant like McDonald's, and it was usually after we did a sporting event or something, and you got a cheeseburger or a hamburger, and we weren't even cheeseburgers, and it was a hamburger.
It was small.
Yes, it was very small, and you split the fries. We didn't all get large fries, and we didn't get sodas. And so all of that was so much different. And like, I know my mom portion controlled naturally. I don't think she was deliberately doing it. It's just she cooked. She knew how much to cook for our family, and then she served up our plates for us. And we always had, salad. We had a starch. We had vegetables. It's like all of the things that we talk about. And yet then as the world wanted to move faster and we wanted everything quick, and then we started moving towards more processed food, and women went into the workforce, right? And we all know the transition of women going into the workforce even more so impacted that. But it's fascinating because we've created our own mess, and now we're trying to go backwards.
Right.
And I know when I've traveled to Europe and that they live very much the way we're supposed to live, right? Like when you go, you don't see much processed food and fast food and all of that.
Well, and
it's
they
very
shop every
different.
day, and they go to the market.
Yes, and even restaurants, you don't get a gigantic plate of food. When you're in restaurants in Europe, it's very portion, normal.
To American-sized portions.
They do, which is just
I'm not well traveled. Is that an option that shows on the menu?
Well, I mean, I had a friend come in from Australia with her boyfriend a couple years ago, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, is that a portion for just one person?"
It's because you would never eat as much food as you get served in a restaurant at home. Like you just wouldn't serve yourself that much food. It is really kind of fascinating. But what advice do you give? Because it is overwhelming to then think about. So we give up, right? Because we're like, we can't, how am I supposed to do this? I don't have time, or it's too expensive, or, all these things we tell ourselves. But how do you recommend, how do you get started with that? So.
Yeah. And, as the gynecologist, I'm maybe not the exact right person. So I try to get people started, and then I try to make use of the network that I work in. I have a couple primary care colleagues that actually have some additional training in nutrition counseling and health. And even where I work now, we even have a bariatric medicine and surgery practice, which is kind of a new resource that I'm getting used to. But I do try to give people permission to, one, not necessarily look at the scale. Just maybe instead of looking at the scale, look at minutes of exercise. Try and just start anywhere. You don't have to go from nothing to perfect. If you get a 10-minute walk in after lunch or dinner, fantastic. And we know from some studies that actually is a statistically significant, meaningful intervention to help lower your blood sugar.
And everybody can do that, right?
10 minutes. Everybody has 10 minutes. Yes, exactly.
Or if the weather's bad, march in place for 10 minutes and watch your favorite streaming show.
Right. That's true.
And that's why I kind of like the idea of just starting with fiber. I'm like, okay, don't tackle everything, but maybe for the next 3 months, just work on getting enough fiber every day. And don't worry about the rest. Make one change at a time, and give yourself credit for that, because change is hard. And
I love that
it's a big
approach
deal
too.
if you get it right.
It's like just kind of building on something and doing it for a while.
Right.
You're batching a few things. So to your point, you're watching TV, you're marching in place, you're kind of batching something fun with
with
health and exercise.
You're just getting your heart pumping a little more.
Absolutely.
Right?
And finding something you enjoy doing too, right? So it's like we don't all have to do the same thing. It's like if you really hate the treadmill, then but you love taking a walk outside, then walk outside for 10 minutes. Or it's like there's always ways to find something enjoyable that is still movement, for sure. No, I like that. What about, Cyndi, what about social media? So this is something you and I were talking about, and you mentioned this a little bit, Jenny, too, is like the impact social media has had on all of us as well, especially on women, because it affects us in so many ways.
FOMO, I'm comparing myself, I have imposter syndrome. It's all the things. And I know realistically, common sense wise, I know like people are sometimes just showing their best selves.
Right.
You know, it may not be authentic, which is an overused word as well. But what is the role? that you think that social media plays,
especially in women's health? Because I think, to your point where you were talking about resetting our metabolism, and you can't get on Instagram or Facebook without seeing a million ads or stories or workouts or how we're all going to overnight going to drop that 50 pounds if you just eat avocados. And that's going to change everything, you know?
I missed that one. Darn.
That's good. I like guacamole.
With some good
it's
chips.
The chips, that's right.
They
so
meant
how
just avocados.
That's right. Not the guacamole or the chips. I know. How do you deal with that as a health professional and maybe helping women as they see all of that sort through, like what is real and what isn't?
And I wish I had the perfect answer, because you've identified what the problem is it's so hard to tell what is truthful and meaningful and what is just an advertisement that you don't even realize is an advertisement until you're 15 minutes in and you're like, oh, they are trying to sell me something. So do always be suspicious when they're trying to sell you something, right?
That's good advice. That
honestly,
just by itself.
That's a big litmus test right there. If they're trying to sell you something, it's may not be legit. So I wish I had the perfect answer for that. I do think it's a fantastic tool. It's just that we're missing the peer review process and the editing process that happened when we were purely in the world of printed literature. But even then, once we developed the technology to self-publish at home, then we were already in danger of not being able to tell. So good quality data is everything that we learned in elementary school for the science fair, you want to follow the scientific method and the information, we should be able to replicate it in studies, and that's good science. It's just hard to find out sometimes what is good and what is not. I do try to point my patients to resources that I think are reliable. You heard me say Dr. Gunter, she has a lot out there. She has a blog that's called The Vagenda. That's good. And I admire her for trying to get reliable information out there. And she's not selling anything. But Harvard is good. The Mayo Clinic is good. Cleveland Clinic is good. These big reputable places do put good information. Any of the medical societies, so American College of OBGYN, ACOG, American Academy for Family Physicians is good. American Academy of Pediatrics. I recommend those a lot because of the world that I'm in. Those are the relevant medical societies. The NIH is a great resource. CDC, although they made some questionable choices during the pandemic, but in general, the information they put out on their website is good.
Reliable.
If it's, if it says .gov, G-O-V, that's usually a more reliable website than a .com.
Absolutely.
And .org is that one's hard because there are some great places that are .org and some that are not. Menopause.org, for example, is the website for the North American Menopause Society. That's a good one. But sometimes it's a matter of going through the information with someone you trust, which hopefully is your doctor, and saying, okay, can I rely on this or not? Is this a good one? But,
No, that's great advice, because I do think we turn to social media too much. Now, I mean, I'm definitely a Dr. Google. I mean, I'm always on there just because I like to be informed, but I do recognize that it's only as good as the source, and and also then, but I'll take that in. I might talk to my doctor about it and say, well, I was reading this, or exactly. Right? But I don't make my decisions or life choices necessarily off that. Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. No, I like that. Credible sources are really key, and we are seeing more often that some of those sources are now posting onto like Instagram or Facebook and some of the social media sites to maybe combat some of the bad information that's out there.
Because those platforms are here to stay.
They are.
And so we need to learn how to use them, right? Yeah. And I mean, I like to scroll on social media too. I scroll through Facebook every morning when I'm sipping my coffee. That's how I like to start my day. Yeah. And I learn a lot. I mean, YouTube videos out there for updating surgical techniques. I mean, my partners and I have all learned how to use the robot at our hospital because we just acquired it 1.5 years ago. And the videos that are out there were really helpful because honestly, that's not that much different than flying to a conference and watching someone present their video when I can just watch it on my own screen. So
over and over if you need to.
Pause it when I need to, zoom in. I mean, it's a tremendous tool for good.
As a patient, I love it too. When I was having my gallbladder removed, I went out and watched the whole surgical procedure on YouTube.
Why not?
Because I wanted to know. I wanted to know what it was and what to expect and kind of, how they do. Because they do use the robot and it is fascinating. And I was like, well, I kind of want to know what this is going to look like. So it is nice for patient education when you see real stuff. I mean, it's really helpful.
It's wonderful. And it's good for physicians to be able to compare techniques and learn little tips and tricks about a particular tool. And say, okay, well, if you come in this way instead of that way, then it's going to work better. I mean,
so it's just a matter of like, do your homework, make sure to your point, it's .gov maybe as opposed to .org, unless you really can find the reliable sources.
Yeah, there's lots of good .orgs out there, but then there's some that aren't.
Exactly. And then talk to your doctor. Exactly. Then talk to the professionals.
That's that whole collaboration again, though, right?
Exactly. Tying it all together.
What do you think about like normalizing, and I've got mixed feelings about this, normalizing women's health. So like I have to admit, I struggle with the commercials with shaving the genital area, like these, razor commercials. That is a little uncomfortable for me still today, even though it's completely normal and lots of people do it. But now, what are your thoughts around how we're trying to move in that direction? And what are the pros and cons of normalizing women's health issues?
And from my perspective, it's mostly a pro to try to normalize it. And tangentially, you never need to remove your body hair, medically speaking. It's fine if it's a cosmetic choice, but there is never a medical necessity to remove it, especially before seeing your gynecologist. It's okay. We know where the hair is supposed to grow. Right. You do not have to give yourself folliculitis just to have a checkup. Permission. Really fine.
That's right. That's it. It's okay. We've seen it all.
And if we need to talk about safe ways to remove the hair, that we can do that.
Yes.
Scraping a blade along your skin in some body parts is not the safe way to do it. But
great advice.
But the dependence on the male normative standard in medicine is a big problem. Yeah. So the only way to get past that is to acknowledge that women are slightly more than half of the population and that we should have a female normative standard to look
some
at
of this stuff too.
Yes.
And generationally too, like.
We're getting more comfortable with it, right?
Kudos to the kids. They are doing it. We are getting menstrual hygiene products into the public bathrooms, which is fantastic.
It's such a big deal anymore. Yeah. We don't have to be embarrassed by this stuff. And
No, I'm so proud of the kids that are making this a normal thing and are just kind of giving the older generations the finger about not making it normal.
Right. Well, we were kind of taught to be embarrassed by it, right?
Right.
Because I remember reading somewhere it said that the only true lady is one who can remain like, what was the word? Like basically giving childbirth, if you can still kind of remain completely I don't even know what the word is, demure or something during that, like, that's a true lady or something like that. And it's amazing the things that we were taught were embarrassing. So having a period was embarrassing. That was not, even though perfectly normal and a part of the being a woman, but that was embarrassing. Honestly, having bowel movements. I mean, all of those things, like somehow these things that, they're talking about it. I was telling Cyndi, I was just listening to the Mel Robbins podcast the other day, and she was talking to about gastrointestinal health and everything. And they started talking about their poops. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was just mortifying to think that you're talking about poop. But it's a normal thing to do. And women need to be comfortable with the fact that we are human beings and these are a part of being a woman, and that's okay. So,
of being a living creature, Remember learning about living systems in elementary or middle school biology class? Digestion and excretion are normal for everyone.
Normal. And again, talk to your doctor about like, is this normal, or, not just the talking about it, but just having that comfort to have those conversations.
Oh yeah, because
with your doctor, with your partner, with your friends. Absolutely.
No, especially things like GI health or anything to do with the female anatomy, body parts, it's embarrassing as an older generation. And I am really proud of the younger generation who are much more comfortable with their bodies.
I love their conversations.
Me too. Yeah. I would never have had those, and still, like I said, make me uncomfortable. But I'm proud of them for doing it because it needs to happen.
Yeah, I agree. And I was raised in that same era where, that's a little hard to talk about outside of the exam room, but I accept that it's the right thing to do. And I'm glad that they're moving in that direction.
Me too. Yeah, I totally agree. I don't know if we need all the commercials about it. But I am proud of them for talking about it. Maybe cut back a little bit on the commercials. That's right. But let's talk about
Find
it.
a happy medium.
Absolutely. Maybe a little balance in it.
So what other questions have we maybe not asked?
Oh, boy, I don't know. You sent me some in advance. Did we skip any of the really important ones?
Let's see. Let's talk a little bit. You know what I'm kind of curious about? Your thoughts on, and I've been going through this myself, and I know Cyndi's been dealing with some of this too, is the correlation between gut health and brain health, and just overall being being healthy in general. But how much of it is tied to the gut? We've always we don't think about our guts, but it's like that's a big part of it, right?
Right.
Yeah, or
it's a
even
big deal.
the correlation between gut health and mental health, because they're tied to one another, and they're doing more and more studies. What are your thoughts on that?
It's one of those areas that just needs more research, right? We don't know what we don't know, but we have this suspicion about what we don't know.
Right.
And so I think it's one of the big frontiers in medicine, right? I think there's a lot about women's health in particular that is a frontier. Gut health is a frontier. The placenta is a frontier, right? Kind of the last endocrine organ that we don't really understand. So I think there's a lot to be determined still. And we're in that phase now where there's probably a lot of marketing and people trying to sell products. And I'm like, we don't have the data yet to support that claim. So as with a lot of supplements out there, it's like, if they're selling you something, be a little suspicious. But I do think there's a lot to be learned there about, what the microbiome is, what it can do, what are biofilms, and how pathologic are those? How do we disrupt them to restore a normal microflora? I know we're learning about this in the world of colitis, and so I think it's exciting to learn. We're learning about it with the GLP-1 medications, right? The semaglutide, tirzepatide, and those hormones instead of gonadal hormones. I think we're finally focusing on the right body system hormones that are important for hunger and well-being. One of my colleagues the other day was just telling me she's studying to become board certified in obesity management and is learning about the GLP related receptors in the brain. I'm like, oh yeah, I never learned about that in medical school.
That'll be fascinating.
There's all these things for us to learn about. And talking about hormones, it's not just hormones, it's the downstream effect on the neurotransmitters that really matters for so much of what we perceive, right? Yeah. The angst and anxiety and discomfort or even perception of hunger and fullness, right? And so after we understand the hormones, then we need to move on to the neurotransmitters. Even with hot flashes, right? The newest product on the market is for the neurokinin 3 receptor activity. And so that's super exciting for women that can't take estrogen, that there's now an option that is not affecting the hormones and the blood clotting issues. So,
So more is coming out all the time.
Yes, thank goodness. So
that's really
I think it's exciting research. I think what we do know is that a lot of the healthy bacteria that we want to thrive in our intestinal system, they need prebiotics. Well, guess where that comes from? Vegetables and fiber. So it comes back to
what you were talking about. Your diet.
It's funny how it's all linked, right? Logical, but funny how we just, common sense is lacking sometimes when it comes to our health. We just some of that stuff, you're like, well, when you hear it, you're like, well, it just sounds like common sense. But clearly we don't exercise common sense when it comes to taking care of ourselves. So it's funny.
Of the common sense things.
I remember my grandmother asking me and my sister, how are your bowel movements? Are you moving your bowels? And I'm like, turned out she was right. That was a good question.
That was a good question.
You should eat more fiber and vegetables to have a good bowel movement.
No, it's true. Yeah. Well, and it wasn't until we decided that was embarrassing that we stopped talking about it. Because that's a lot of it, right? We just stop talking about those things. And then you're not actually realizing how much that's impacting your body.
The Delta Principle is proud to sponsor the HR Her Resources podcast. If your organization is embarking on a digital transformation or navigating organizational change, the Delta Principle is here to support you. With over 17 years of expertise in organizational change management, we're eager to collaborate, educate, and partner with you to ensure a successful transformation. We now also offer personalized change management coaching and classes tailored for employees on navigating change and for leaders on effectively leading change. Please reach out to us by emailing info@thedeltaprinciple.com. And please follow us on LinkedIn.
So let's transition a little bit to women's health and work, because I was sharing with Cyndi, I was at a conference a month or so ago. It was Women in Leadership, and they were talking about menopause. And right now there's a lot of, I've even seen menopause leave and things like that. One of the women said, I don't necessarily want another thing that stigmatizes me as a woman. I'd rather be able to have the time away from work to handle and deal with the things that I need to. Yeah, the flexibility and understanding that we're going through different things in our life and being able to do that. What are your thoughts on women's health and the world of work? Because that's another area where we have always hidden from that too. We didn't tell people we were taking the day off because our child was sick, because that would make us look like we couldn't do our jobs. And we certainly never called in over menstrual cramps or anything like that.
Or a mental health
day or any of that, because those were all things that made us look even weaker as women. So we didn't want to bring our women's issues forward. So what are your thoughts about that? And maybe even some advice for our HR listeners out there as to thinking about how do you help women and support them in those regards.
Yeah. And that's more just getting away from that male normative standard, right? Just we have to figure out how to embrace a female normative standard.
Yeah.
My HR question is, why do I have to fill out paperwork for maternity leave as sick leave? Why can we just not acknowledge that it's not an illness?
Right. Yes, it is not.
They get pregnant
thing that I'm doing here. Yeah. Growing a human.
I mean, an illness might happen, right? Of course, there are complications in pregnancy, but for just say an uncomplicated delivery, can I just check the box that yes, she's pregnant, and then we're done? And why are there 7 pieces of paper for us to fill out? But stop calling it sick leave. But I mean, I wish I knew how to fix it, but it is just, and here's another area where the younger generation is getting it better.
They are doing better, yes.
Because even over my life, I feel like the policies to support longer maternity leave are getting better.
Yeah.
The normalization of breast pumping is so much better.
Yeah.
You know, have we caught up with the rest of the world with a really good length of maternity leave? No, but we're getting incrementally better. We need more fans in the workplace for all of, because we do have different temperature perceptions and fluctuations. We need more research to understand those. I don't think any of us really fully understands the differences in temperature perception throughout a menstrual cycle, throughout a pregnancy. We know that we can get hot flashes in our perimenopausal transition, but those hot flashes can start years before our periods even stop. And so when you add that all together, we need the basics of HVAC control in the workplace, right? And to stop being told by a male normative standard to just accept whatever temperature it is. And I mean, I kind of chuckle at how many people I know that have a combination of space heaters and fans.
Yes.
It's true. Because you have to adjust.
Depends on what
hour to hour, day to day, right?
That's very true.
Turn the fan on, turn the fan off. Yeah.
I
so
like
it's
what
just
you've
one
said,
more
though,
spot
about normative. When you said you used the phrase, and I'm going to say it wrong, making it not a male normative standard.
Right.
Finding out what that is. Did I say it right? Good. I was like, in my brain, it didn't sound right. But for women, it is finding that and being okay with it, right? And that it's all right. We can be women.
Right.
We have permission to be who we are.
And we don't have to say, like, I feel, and this is, people will agree or disagree with this, but I hate the term women of a certain age.
Oh my goodness.
I find that a little offensive. I'm not going to lie. So
no, it's true.
It doesn't matter that I'm a woman of a certain age. It's just any woman at any age has their needs when they're in the workplace. And it's okay to be comfortable, because then guess what? I'm more productive. I'm a happier employee. You know, I come to work, I can get my job done just by putting a fan next to my desk. That's pretty simple,
it's a simple
stuff.
thing.
Absolutely. And I shouldn't have to say, oh, I'm so sorry because I'm a woman of a certain age. I need a fan next to my desk. Or,
right.
You know.
Yeah, you shouldn't be made to feel funny. I was telling Cyndi this great story. I was I was suffering from the hot flashes. I was in perimenopause, going through all of that, and I'm at this. It's already we're in California and it had been raining and it's like the humidity, and I live in Colorado. I live in a dry climate. So I'm already going to be having some sweating issues already. Then you add the hot flash on top of that seemed to come on, and, you know, like maybe, I don't know, anxiety driven or something, but whatever it was. And here I'm going in to see the fire. We were meeting with the fire department, and the fire chief actually says very quietly to one of the other gentlemen in the room to go turn the air down or turn it up so that I could get more air in the room, because he could tell how miserable I was.
That's awesome.
But just that little thing, he didn't make a big deal out of it. He didn't draw attention to me for it. But just that little, that grace, that made me feel, and then I was not self-conscious about it, and I relaxed, and eventually the hot flash passed, and we could all go back to normal. But in that moment, I was really struggling. And it's things like that and that's a great word, is grace, is having a little bit of grace for people at different periods of time in their life, and just little things that maybe we need in order to adapt. That's doesn't make us different or what makes us different, but it doesn't make us wrong or weird or anything else, or word that we should be embarrassed.
Experiencing our normal physiology.
Just being a woman. That's just part of what we go through. So
Sure, men have some things too. So
I'm sure they do. Yeah, I'm sure men have different things.
Kind of being nice to each other, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Being nice to each other. Yes. Treating people the way you would want to be treated.
Exactly.
So, the golden rule. So, it's very true.
That was the first thing my parents made me memorize when I was a child.
I love that.
Yeah.
Good parents.
Yeah. Just practicing. It wasn't a nursery rhyme or a song. It was the golden rule.
It was the golden rule.
Awesome.
I like that. That is really good. And it's a good reminder to everyone out there, is that because the purpose too is not for us to call out men or to make this a woman versus man thing. It's just normalizing the fact that we are women
There
and
are
we
some
are different.
differences. Yeah,
And
for
and
sure.
all we're asking for is the same consideration we would give any other human being. So I like that. That's good. Good stuff. Well, Jenny, we could really talk to you I forever. So I do hope that you'll come back. We would love to be able to have your expertise
Absolutely.
in addressing women's issues. And
Thank you for your time.
Oh,
We
thank you
so
for having me.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's so fun to have you here in the studio with us. So, we'll thank our producer, Logan,
Yes.
for doing another amazing job.
LJM
LJM Productions. Yeah.
Yes.
Behind the scenes, making all the magic work.
He does.
He does.
Every time.
Yeah, we're lucky. And he's pretty patient with us, too. So
He's very patient
He is
with
very
us.
patient, yes. So, no, but we appreciate him. And thanks to all of our listeners out there. And
thank you so much for listening in and spending time with us. We know you can turn on any podcast or YouTube video. And so we're just very grateful. And thank you, Jenny, for being a part of this today with us.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of the HR Her Resources podcast. We're so happy to have you with us on this journey. Music and production by Logan Misegadis of LJM Productions. We'd also like to thank our intern, Lauren Banas, for creating our logo and supporting our social media postings. If you'd like to connect with Logan or Lauren, you can find their information in the show notes. If you found value in our discussion and think someone else might as well, please follow and subscribe to our LinkedIn and share with a friend. Until our next episode, please take care and continue to support one another.